Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the 8th Cherry Blossom Financial Education Institute. And we will actually start with some welcoming remarks from Billy Hensley, which is the President and CEO of the National Endowment for Financial Education. And then we are also having Beth, which is I have it here actually. It's a long title, and it is the Vice President of Research and Impact. And so, Billy, please.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon. It's been a couple of years since I've been here in person, and I was on video a couple of years ago, I think. But been around since the beginning, or at least since the second Cherry Blossom. And this is an important event for us. Not that we really do anything other than show up and learn from all of you, but we invest in things that we want to produce. And thoughtful discourse, thoughtful dialogue, better data, all of these things are a component of how we think about our work. And it is a no-brainer for us to support this event. There's so few opportunities to be together and reflect and discuss and talk about financial education and FinEd research only. We tend to skirt around the periphery of so many other disciplines, it feels like. And Anna Maria and Bill and Mike a few years ago had the foresight to say, let's create space to talk about just this topic. Let's foster thoughtful research, open peer review and dialogue. And we are very happy to be a part of that. The National Endowment for Financial Education, we turned 30 last year, and we pride ourselves on being what our community needs. And every version of that has been what wasn't happening in that moment. So high school financial education programs, college financial education programs, blogging, public awareness campaigns about financial literacy. We were first in all of those things, and we were very proud of that. And now there are many bloggers, there are many quality, excellent, thoughtfully designed financial education programs, but there's still much more to do in terms of research, in terms of advocacy, and making sure that every young person, every worker really, has access to rigorous quality FinEd. And that's what we're focused on now, better data, access, equity and inclusion, because we know that this work is an essential component of our financial health. And if we want to make sure that financial education is as well designed as possible and in every context. And that's why we invest in research and thoughtful data. And we do that in many ways. And you can learn more about us. But the nice thing about being us is we get to decide what's important. And what's important to us are projects like this. And we're very proud to be associated with GFLEC and the Cherry Blossom Financial Education Institute, and the work of all of you. I see a lot of familiar faces in the room, and it's nice to see you. And those of you who I don't know, I hope I get to chat with you at some point today. But I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Beth Bean, who's our Senior VP, to just say a couple of words about the research work at NEFI, just a quick overview, like a 30-second overview, because we don't want to take too much time. And then just kind of recognize the other NEFI folks here so you can get to know all of us.
Great. Thank you, Billy. Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to take a second to quickly introduce the research team who's here. So we have Dr. Josh Carabello, who's our Managing Director of Research. He replaced Jill Jones in case you worked with Jill in the past. And he's been with us since November and wonderful. And then also Lauren Lacey is here, and she manages all of our grants. So our grant cycle has shifted to once a year. And you'll hopefully see communication from her, and we welcome LOIs and submissions. That would be wonderful. So NEFI is a research organization, as Billy mentioned, and we really focus on what works in financial education and who it works for. We have a big DEI component of our work and really wanting to customize standardized financial education, so it does work for everyone. And I just wanted to say, so last year I hadn't been to Cherry Blossom before, and I had to do the welcoming remarks, and I didn't know what this was, and I was like, welcome, and I didn't have much to say. And then it was my very favorite event. So I'm like, I'm never missing this again, because it is wonderful. It is, I learned so much last year. The research is so impactful. The connections and conversations are so thoughtful, and the policy connection is really important. So I couldn't wait to come again this year. And if you haven't been here before, you're in for a treat, because this is the climax of our field. So welcome. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, because I might be one of the older person in the room, I'm going to read or something like that. I mean, not exactly reading, but sort of. But first of all, thank you very much and welcome everybody to the 8th Cherry Blossom Financial Education Institute. It is the 8th institute. And I am so happy about this, and it could not have been done without the continuous help of NIFI, which has been a supporter from the very beginning, not just of the Institute, but also of the Financial Literacy Research Award that we will bestow upon one of you, and also the Rising Financial Literacy Scholar Award. You don't get to work with many organizations where the president and the CEO comes to the meeting. And we are so excited to have you here, Billy. Thank you so much. And when they bring like the best people in the organization, and we are just so happy to have so many people here. I had written their name to actually welcome them, but now we have already met some of you, so make sure you kind of meet with them and talk to them. They are the best organization really for financial literacy, and we have been very, very fortunate to work with them from the very beginning. We are 11 years old, and so it means that we started the Cherry Blossom Institute almost right away, and very much thanks to the support of NIFI. Like Beth, maybe I wait for this event all year long. This is a great time for the Institute. As you know, trees are blooming in Washington, D.C. The cherries bloomed a month ago because of this unusual weather. And by the way, we did request a very good weather today, but I think they kind of overdid it. I know we sent a big check, but we didn't want so many degrees. So again, we need to coordinate with the weatherman next year. April, as you know, is Financial Literacy Month. So it's great to have this institute during April. I'm almost done with my teaching of personal finance. I love the course, and I am so happy about how much the students have learned, but I have to leave a little bit this afternoon to go and finish teaching. But the most important things is I just so much look forward to this 1.5 days of presentation, discussions about financial literacy and financial education with many great scholars attending, in particularly bright young ones. And so we are also very happy to host this rising scholar. Mike, Alberto, and I had a very good time, but also difficult time choosing the papers because we had so many great submissions. And we want to thank Alberto and Mike for their work and also for being part of the research committee. And I'm so glad that Alberto has accepted to be our keynote speaker today. We give him all of the work, as you have imagined, like research committee, keynote speaker, and so on. But it's because he's doing such cutting edge research, and we are so excited to have him. And I'm also very glad that Carly Urban will be giving the special address tomorrow on a very big and important project that she has been doing. And in case you don't know, she's an alumna of GW, and so we are very happy to have her back on campus, and all the econ department wants to come and speak to her tomorrow. And thank you all for coming and attending. I know that some of you have traveled a distance to be here, so welcome. And I would like to define the research that is presented today in this 1.5 days as research with an impact. And this is why we are also so happy to have here representatives from important institutions, government agency, foundation, including FINRA, Investor Education Foundation, the SEC, the CFPB, the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, the Government Accountability Office, the Investment Company Institute, Visa, and so many others. And to contribute to that impact, we are releasing today the new TIA Institute GFLAG Personal Finance Index. Each year, we collect data basically on the knowledge that people have on these concepts at the basis of all of personal finance decision that we make every day. This is the 7th year, so the cherry blossom is 1 year later. If they were kids, they would almost go to school together. And it is called Financial Wellbeing and Literacy in a High Inflation Environment, where we had actually some interesting findings about the effect of inflation. There are actually copies on the registration table if you'd like to read about it. And last but not least, I'm grateful to the GFLAG team for their hard work putting this event together. So I hope you will, talk to them and meet them throughout the coffee break. I know they've been in touch with you, and I believe they have read your presentation. So in case you cannot do it today or you are skipping a line, Hannah can actually pitch in and just give you comments. Okay, this is how much they know and care about you. So looking forward to listening to the presentation and discussion. And let me spend 1 minute. I know it has been longer than expected, but I love to talk. So some technical details. If you want to walk around, particularly during the break, we have a wonderful view. This is called City View for a reason, and you can have a view of the Washington Monument and so on. So kind of feel free to do so. But also during the break in particular, feel free to go and read kind of the posters of the graduate student and the kind of junior scholars and so on. They are, they will present tomorrow, but they are also going to be there to, talk to you as well. If you don't want to speak in the microphone, but you prefer to go around, don't go beyond these 2 lines, black lines, because otherwise we cannot follow you and we cannot register you. If you really want to walk a lot around, then we give you a lavaliers. Maybe we follow you with the camera, but I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, so maybe try to stay within this line. And as you know, the restrooms are at the back of the room. I know that probably, and Joshua will tell you that, we have somebody taking the time. So, it will be sitting over there, like in soccer, we'll give you 1 minute. And then, if not 5 minutes, 1 minute, and then like the red card and the yellow card and things like that. So you don't score if you go too long for this. And just, let me just say, looking forward to the presentation and discussion. So welcome again, and let's begin. But please, another round of applause to our supporter, Nifi.
Welcome, everybody. I'm glad to have the honor to introduce today's keynote speaker, Alberto Rossi, whose extensive work on household and personal finance is so inspiring, especially for young researchers like me. Alberto is a professor of finance at the McDonough School of Business at Georgetown University. He is a prolific researcher whose work has been published in leading academic journals. Alberto is also the director of the AI Analytics of Future of Work Initiative at Georgetown, an academic fellow of the Luhana Academy, and research fellow of FinTech at Cornell Initiative. And last but not the least, a research fellow of the G53 Financial Literacy and Personal Finance Research Network. Alberto has worked extensively with big data. He has collaborated with major brokerage houses, FinTech firms, and asset managers around the world. His FinTech expertise includes, but is not limited to, in machine learning, artificial intelligence, and robot advising. He has applied his knowledge to investigate innovative policies for household and personal finance in both experimental and non-experimental settings. His recent work studies how robot advising in fintech can help individuals make better financial decisions, not only for investments, but also for debt, consumption, saving, and lending. His effort in building a bridge between personal finance and technology is very inspiring and helping me develop some of my earlier work. On top of that, let me say that he has boundless energy He just came back from a one-day round trip to San Francisco, and he's here now presenting at the conference. That's amazing. Welcome, Alberto, and thank you so much for being here. The floor is yours.
Let me just grab this. Okay, let me see if you guys can hear me, right? Perfect. Well, thank you so much for the fantastic introduction. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And so let me tell you a little bit of, so what I want to do today with this talk is to tell you a little bit about my research on robo-advisors and how robo-advisors have been helping individuals making better decisions. And you see that this specific talk is named Algorithmic Aversion and Robo-Advisors, as we're trying to understand right now what are the biggest barriers to the adoption of these automated tools. We know that these automated tools for financial decisions can be extremely useful for individuals, but of course, if individuals don't trust the algorithms, they don't trust the machine, then we run the risk of not having not being able to scale up the effectiveness of these two. Now, the plan of the talk for me is going to be, first I'm going to kind of introduce you very briefly to what robo-advisors are, what are the main features of robo-advisors, and how different robo-advisors how different robo-advisors operate. Then I want to kind of mention a couple of open questions in robo-advice. In particular, I think there is a ton of work that can be done in trying to understand the degree of complementarity between financial literacy and the adoption of these robo-advising tools. And then I'm going to present you this new working paper I have on algorithmic aversion and robo-advice. Okay, so first, what is robo-advising? The way we define robo-advising is kind of financial advice that is generated by an algorithm. So it's done automatically. It is tailored to the client's characteristic or to the investor characteristic. And very importantly, it's easy to implement. I mean, we have a lot of evidence right now that one of the kind of a very provocative paper by Bhattacharya et al. What they were arguing is that you can tell people what to do and give them very good financial advice, but if you don't show them exactly how to implement the advice, they will simply not do it, right? So they say you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So you can really think of robo-advisor, the way we think about robo-advising is something like a middle ground between a no intervention, so a libertarian approach, and the nudges that Richard Thaler and David Leibson and so on and so forth have been pushing, this kind of libertarian paternalism. Now, why are robo-advisors so important? Well, we know that individual investors are not particularly financially savvy, and everyone in this room is trying to spend their career trying to improve the decisions of individuals. You know that traditional financial advisors could help, but they also have a lot of problems or limitations, right? So they are generally expensive. Sometimes they're ineffective in the sense that they have their own biases that they transmit into their client's portfolio. And then I think one of the biggest problem is that they can only cater to individuals that have a certain level of wealth, right? So it will not be possible for them to cater to individuals that don't have enough investable assets because it's not going to be worth their time. Now, because of this, of course, if we can automate the process of financial advice, we have, there is a lot of scope for increasing the effectiveness, but also increasing the number of people that receive advice, so expanding the market for financial advisors. So in principle, you have that there are several advantages the robo-advisors carry with them, right? We have that they can offer financial advice for very low fees. They can increase financial inclusion, so they kind of serve individuals of any level of wealth. Also, one, I think, aspect that is very important is that because they are algorithmic in nature, they can be tracked and monitored over time, where we can see exactly why certain decisions were given to the individuals at given point in times. They can be explained to investors and regulators. Of course, what are the biggest limitations or what are the biggest challenges that we are facing right now? Many clients are going to be potentially algorithmic averse, so they will not trust a machine making decisions for them. And many algorithms don't work very well. So you actually have that having a fully automated system that tell people what to do under different market conditions may not be trivial, because you may find yourself very easily in uncharted territory at some point in time. Now, there are many like different robo-advisors are going to be differing across many dimensions. We usually think of them as across 4 dimensions. One is the degree of personalization of the advice. On the one hand, I always make the argument that target date fund are a form of robo-advice, in a sense that it's an investment vehicle that carries you from your mid-aged all the way to retirement, but the only characteristic that matters is your age, right? So that's the only personalization you have. On the other hand, you're going to have that robo-advisors can cater and can be kind of tailored to the characteristics of the investor, like the type of job they have, where they live, the number of kids they have, and so on and so forth. Second, you're going to have that they differ across in terms of the involvement of the investor. In some cases, you're going to have the robo-advisors are going to be what we call advisors, in the sense that they tell you what should be the decision you make, and then the investor has the choice of following the advice or not. In some other, instead, they're going to be kind of what we call robo-managers, right? So you sign up for a kind of an investment vehicle that is managed for you, and then you're on rails. You kind of completely lose control of your investments. Then you have a difference in terms of the discretion to deviate. So you have that in some cases you can deviate from the advice and take your own course. You can kind of carve yourself some personalization by yourself. In other cases you can't. And finally you have this, the presence of human interaction actually becomes very important. In particular, you tend to have that one of the way companies try to fight this kind of reluctance of individuals to follow the algorithmic advice was to include this hybrid form of robo-advice, where you have individual advisors that complement the algorithm. Okay, but one thing that I think is very important is that many times when I talk about robo-advice, people immediately think about Wealthfront and Betterment and Vanguard, so the typical kind of tool that automatically invests in investors' portfolio. But if you think about, individuals have a much more complex financial life, right? So households have, if you think about like households, we can think about like as firms. So they're going to have assets and they're going to have liabilities. And of course, they're going to have financial assets. And that's kind of what is generally referred to as kind of robo-advice. But they also have durable assets, right? They have to buy cars, they have to buy a house, and they have to kind of build their own human capital. And on the other side, they have the liabilities. So the mortgages they take, the credit card debt, the student loans. Now, automation can help individuals making better decisions across all of these realms, or these realms. And this is what I think should be always thought as robo-advice. And like, you really think about robo-advice as any sort of automated tool that help individuals making better decisions across all aspects of their financial life. And this is kind of my research agenda. This has been, I'm getting old, unfortunately. This has been like the work of the last 5 to 6 years. We have my collaborators and I work on kind of robo-advising for investment decisions. If you're interested, this is probably the best summary chapter. And basically all these kind of papers are going into trying to understand how different forms of robo-advice for financial decisions are kind of how effective they are and how they are set up. But then we also have a lot of work into how robo-advising can help individuals making better consumption, saving, and debt decision. Once again, if you're interested in a summary, there is this handbook chapter called New Frontiers of Robo-Advice, Consumption, Saving, Debt, and Taxes, and it will give you a sense of what has been done both in the academic world as well as in industry in terms of helping people making these decisions. But one thing that I think the dream for people that do work in robo-advice is to actually have a system that is going to be able to help individuals making financial decisions taking all their financial life into consideration, right? Right now, everything is done in a very piecemeal fashion, right? We have some robo-advisors that help people making better saving decisions by doing goal setting, with some other robo-advisors that help managing credit card debt, but there is no full integration. And that's why, like, I think that Andy Lowe, a couple of years back, had this kind of very provocative quote that said, okay, robo-advisors right now have a great potential, but the technology is still immature. They were saying that they're the rotary phones to today's iPhone. And I mean, there is kind of some effort in the industry to have AI-based financial advisors that will incorporate all kind of the decisions an individual make, right? So, well, like the choice of refinancing your mortgages is going to be connected to the investment portfolio you have, and it's going to connect it to also your credit card debt decisions and so on and so forth. I think we're not there yet, but I think this is something that we should strive for. And I think that some of the biggest challenges we have in robo-advisors right now is, like, the first one is whether really we can get to a holistic type of robo-advice. But then there are also a lot of other questions that I think are fascinating, right? On the one hand, you may think that kind of robots will democratize financial advice. Like, in principle, of course, if we reduce the cost to receiving advice, you imagine that more people are going to be able to receive financial advice. Financial advice. In that case, we may be able to kind of reduce wealth inequality, but it is not clear that that is actually the case. Another big problem is going to be what is the effect on the systemic effect of homogenizing investors' portfolio, right? So if you have that everyone is on the same kind of robo-advising kind of style, you're going to have that if there are market crashes, all the trades across all the individuals are going to place at the same time. So you may actually have a lot of amplifications of potential kind of negative shocks. Second, you're going to have also the one thing that I think is very important is, and this is something that is definitely understudied, is what is the complementarity between robo-advice and financial advice. One leitmotif that is coming out a lot from this robo-advising literature is that financial advice is absolutely crucial for individuals to enter into robo-advice, right? It really helps individuals kind of buy into this methods. And so it's something that we're going to have to invest. And in fact, a lot of robo-advisors now, what they try to do is to also provide financial literacy within the platform, exactly on kind of providing financial literacy on demand. Another thing that I think is very important is the degree to which algorithmic aversion is going to be limiting the scale of adoption of these robo-advisors, right? So what I'm going to have today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this project I have on hybrid robo-advising as a solution. But this is actually this is a paper that we just finished, and it's kind of heartbreaking because now ChatGPT came out, and actually ChatGPT may actually overturn a lot of the work that we've been doing, right? So before, you used to have the chatbots were pretty bad. I mean, people were not able to use them. If you ever try to use the chatbot on Expedia, United, and so on and so forth, you would get frustrated after a couple of minutes, right? And instead, now they are pretty good. So it may actually be that a lot of the work that I'm presenting you today about the effectiveness of hybrid robo-advice is not going to be that relevant anymore because ChatGPT is going to blow it out of the water, or maybe not. So we just don't know yet. Okay, so the paper I want to talk to you about today is titled Algorithmic Aversion, Theory and Evidence from Robo-Advice. This is joint work with Fiona Gregg at Vanguard, Tarun Ramadorai and Ansgar Walter at Imperial College, and Stephen Utkus, that used to be at Vanguard, now is at Georgetown and Penn. And the motivation for this work is what I mentioned before, is like, we know that these algorithms are ubiquitous. They have the potential of bringing massive benefits to household markets. But of course, if individuals do not trust these tools, they will not adopt them, right? So lack of trust in algorithms is going to have the potential of limiting tremendously the scalability of these tools. And we know that algorithmic aversion is real. Like, we have a lot of psychological lab findings showing you that they are a massive barrier to tech adoption. And but there is really very little consensus as what are the psychological underpinnings of algorithmic aversion. So what we're going to be doing in this paper, we're going to decompose algorithmic aversion into different components, and I'm going to tell you exactly what these components are. And then I'm going to be quantifying the relative influence. So by the end of this talk, I'll be able to tell you why I think kind of algorithmic aversion is important and what different components of algorithmic aversion are going to be relevant for us going forward. Okay, so this is a theory and a structural estimation paper. So the theory is based on preference and belief-based aversion. I'm going to tell you in a minute what I mean by this. And then we're going to have structural estimation. Now, the model is going to be a dynamic model of automation adoption where you have the investor that is uncertain regarding the quality of the robo-advisor. And then the investors are going to have 3 channels for algorithmic aversion. We're going to have a disutility channel. You can interpret it as the investors being uneasy or unhappy to interact with the robo-advisor. You then have an uncertainty parameter, which may be that you don't know, you have uncertain regarding the quality of the robo-advisor. And then you have what we call pessimism, which is basically what your expectation of how good the robo-advisor is. Okay? Then we're going to be using data from a US hybrid robo-advisor. This is going to be Vanguard's PAS. It's called Personal Advisory Services. That's the biggest robo-advisor in the US. And the interesting thing about this robo-advisor is that it's hybrid in nature. So the individual, when they sign up for robo-advisor, they will have access to the algorithm that places the trades for them. At the same time, they're going to have a quasi-random assignment to advisors that have heterogeneous quality. So we're going to see what is the relevance of having a good or a bad advisor assigned to you. We're going to have some reduced form result where we show you the causal impact of the human component. We're going to show you that high quality advisors can reduce attrition in robo-advice by as much as 25%. So it really changes how many people stay within robo-advice. And their role, the importance of human advice is going to be particularly important in bad market conditions. So when the market tanks, what usually people do is they freak out and then they kind of drop out of robo-advice. Having a high quality advisor is going to help them stay the course and not sell. Then we're going to do structural inference. We're going to show you that ongoing disutility, so this preference parameter, is going to be much more important than pessimism. So like a lot of the reason why people quit is due to the fact that they do not like to interact with the robo-advisor rather than they think that it's not very good. And then human advisors is going to reduce uncertainty regarding the quality of the robo-advisors by as much as 90%. Okay, so I'm going to have a general model of automation adoption. I'm not going to go into the details. We actually have a more complicated model in the appendix, which I don't have time to go through. But this is going to kind of remind you your grad school days, maybe. But just bear with me. It's actually very intuitive what we're doing. Okay, so we have a number of investors, and they're born robo-advised, right? So on day 0, they are born and they are robo-advised. Then they can choose every period whether to quit robo-advice or not. Now, the quality of the robo-advisor is going to be denoted by a parameter theta, and that is not known to the investor, okay? Now, the crucial thing is that when investors are born into robo-advice, they are randomly assigned to a human advisor. And this human advisor, J, is going to have a lot of important roles. So the important role number 1 is going to be affecting the client's utility from consuming robo-advice. What does it mean? I mean, you can interpret this as just capturing the fact that a good advisor is going to be able to tell the investor what the robo-advisor is doing, why certain decisions are made, why certain decisions are not made, and so on and so forth. And it's also going to affect the client's belief about the quality of the robo-advisor. So it's going to affect the prior distribution of the belief, right? So this theta is going to have a normal distribution with mean mu and with mean m and precision tau, and that's going to be the prior is going to be affected by the robo-advisor you are allocated. Now, from period 1 onward, the investor is just going to learn. It's going to see the performance of the robo-advisor. So it's going to see every period, imagine the return on the robo-advisor gives. That's going to be nothing else, the quality of the robo-advisor plus some noise. And then the investor is just going to update their belief regarding the quality of the robot advice, and they're going to use Bayes' rule. So you can see at every point in time, the beliefs about how good or bad this robot advisor is going to satisfy the standard Kalman filtering equation. Right? Imagine like I'm born on day one, the advisor interacts with me, gives me an idea of what the kind of the quality of the robot advisor is, and then every day I see the performance and I update how this my perception of this robot advisor. So at every point in time, I'm going to have the following decisions. Like what we call the Bellman equation is just going to be a sum of two components, right? It's going to be the maximum of if I decide to stay in robo-advice, I'm going to have that the utility I'm going to have is the instantaneous utility of being advised plus the option to stay robo-advised in the next period. So you can, there's going to be the flow of utility from being advised at time t plus the continuation value of being enrolled at time t plus 1. And if instead I decide to quit robo-advice on that time, I'm going to be denoting the outside service or outside utility as 0. So this is just a standard normalization. So at every point in time, you're going to have that the individual is going to quit if the instantaneous utility from being robo-advised and the continuation value of staying robo-advised is going to be smaller than 0. Now, there is, when we take this to the data, there is some complications because, of course, by this structure, what it means is that if I have two individuals that are assigned to the same advisor and experience exactly the same performance, then they should make exactly the same decisions at each point in time. But of course, in the data, I'm going to have heterogeneity. So what we do is we introduce something that is pretty standard in this literature, which is what we call an implementation error. That's just a kind of standard random noise that is going to be affecting the heterogeneity of investors' decision at each point in time. But effectively, this is going to be the decision to quit is going to be determined on whether the instantaneous utility plus the continuation value is smaller than 0 or not. Now, when we take this to the data, I mean, the ultimate goal for this paper is going to have simulated dynamics and estimate all parameters from there. But for this kind of presentation, I want to do something simpler. I'm going to have an even simplified framework than what I just presented right now. I'm going to have only a 3-period model. You're going to have that the individual signs up at time 0. I mean, automatically is born, robo-advised at time 0. At time 2, he has to leave robo-advised no matter what. So the only decision he's going to have to make is whether to stay robo-advised at time 1 or not. And that's going to make everything much simpler in terms of interpretation of the coefficients. Now, this is going to be the decision of staying robo-advised in period 1. This is on the basis of the belief in time 1. I can write it as the belief at time 0. And this is a pretty ugly pictures. One thing I can do is to introduce a new quantity. I'm going to call it phi. That's going to be just the critical value that makes investors indifferent between quitting and continuing robo-advice at time 1. You can really interpret this as the fixed cost of the disutility from being robo-advised, depending on what advisor you're assigned to. And so this allows me to write the expression I have on the previous page as follows. I'm going to have two components. The first one is going to be, this component is going to be the baseline quit rate. The baseline quit rate is the probability that individuals are going to quit robo-advice on that period. It's going to be a function of two things. First is phi. So if the disutility from being robo-advised increases, you're going to have that the baseline quit rate is going to increase. And second, you're going to have this M. So the more M becomes small, the higher is going to be the baseline quit rate. So that means that the lower your expectation regarding the quality of the robo-advice, the more you're going to quit. And then you're going to have a sensitivity to performance. The Y is a performance. So of course, the better the robo-advice does, the lower likely you are to quit robo-advice. But you're going to have a sensitivity. And the sensitivity is just going to be a function of the precision of your signal and the precision of your prior. So effectively what this means is that if you have that the performance is very well estimated, then you're going to update your prior very much on the basis of the performance. Otherwise, you're going to stick to what you thought before. Okay, so keep in mind this. I mean, this is going to be the equation we're going to be estimating in our empirical setting that I'm going to move on in a minute. Okay, now, When it comes to estimating the model, we could estimate this at the advisor level. One thing that instead we prefer doing is split advisors into high and low retention. I'm going to tell you in a minute how we do it. And then we're going to estimate separately the preference and belief parameters across high retention and low retention advisors. So that's going to be allowing us to kind of isolate where or which kind of source is important in determining the quitting into robo-advice. Now, in order to have causal interpretation of these results, I'm going to have to show you two things. First of all, I have to show you that the assignment of clients to human advisors is quasi-random. So it's independent of the shocks, and effectively, basically what it says is that there should be no matching between the quality of the investor and the quality of the advisor. And then I have to make sure that the advisor type we estimate is not going to be mechanically related to the client's attrition, and we're going to do that using a leave one out estimator that is pretty standard in this literature. Okay, so this is kind of the theoretical framework, and we're going to come back to it, but now let me show you what the data is. So this is data from Vanguard. It's Vanguard PAS. This is Personal Advisory Services. People think about robo-advisors as something that young people use. It actually turns out to be the case that the biggest robo-advisor in the world has that the average investor is around 64 years old. So this is the demographic we're going to be dealing with. We have this is kind of the demographic characteristics of advised investors after 12 months being robo-advised. 60% of these investors are male. The investors have been at Vanguard for approximately 14 years. So there are people that have been with the asset manager for a long time. In terms of wealth, they have a ton of money in there. So it's $760,000. That's the average. Of course, this data is always very rightly skewed. So you have some people that have in the millions. When they are robo-advised, you actually have that a lot of the wealth is invested in very few assets. So approximately 8 instruments is what explains the full kind of portfolio allocations. And most of the kind of instruments are Vanguard products. So 98% of the wealth is in Vanguard products, and I'm going to tell you which one they are in a second. Now, what are the asset allocation characteristics? Everything is in mutual funds. 95% of the wealth is in mutual funds. You have very little in cash, very little in ETF, very little in stocks, and very little in bonds. I mean, there is the way you implement robo-advice nowadays. Some robo-advisors work with ETFs. Some robo-advisors used to use index mutual funds, and this is something that is not doesn't really change that much. In terms of the characteristics of the mutual fund, 80% of the mutual funds are index funds. They have 7 basis points in fees, and the turnover ratio is approximately 26%. Okay. Now, in terms of the performance, I mean, if I show you the difference in average monthly returns between self-directed and robo-advised investors, it's pretty obvious that the robo-advising tool does better, right? So you can see just the blue density just strictly dominates the red one. Now, at the time we were working, so our sample here is from 2014 to 2018. A lot of the investors, like this was actually not very dissimilar from a target date fund in terms of implementation, in the sense that you had that depending on their characteristics, investors were assigned to 5 glide paths, but really almost 95 or 96% of the investors were assigned to only 2 glide paths. And I think what is going to be very interesting for our results is that also the advisor fixed effects are not going to have an explanatory power on the return. So effectively, the portfolio is managed by the machine, and then the investor interacts with the advisor. And so we try to understand how important is the advisor at explaining things to the investor and how useful it is, how important this feature is. Okay. Now, how are we going to measure the quality of the advice? We know that investors that have more than $500,000 in assets under manager are assigned to an advisor. Now, constructing a measure of advice is relatively difficult, in particular in the context of robo-advice. It's a kind of a multifaceted concept. So what we do is kind of follow a kind of revealed preference approach. We're going to be using a leave one out estimator. So we're going to compute the retention rate for advisor J and client I. Is going to be the ratio of the clients assigned to advisor J that do not quit, so that stay in the service, excluding from the computation client I, and also the date at which client I quits, just to avoid kind of contaminating some of our estimates with a cross-sectional correlation in attrition. But this is something that we can kind of construct very different ways or measure of retention for the advisor, and nothing really changes. Now, one thing that I think is crucial here is I need to give you details regarding how are clients assigned to advisors. Now, if you were to sign up for PAS, particularly back then in 2015 and so on and so forth, you would go online, put in all your characteristics, and the robo-advisor would generate a financial plan. And then in order to sign up for robo-advice, you needed to talk to someone. You needed to talk to an individual that would tell you what the robo-advisor plan was, and there would basically be the advisor assigned to you. In order to do it, you would give your availability, and then there was a scheduling system within Vanguard that would assign individuals to advisors. The way they're done is in such a way that all the advisors should have the same targeted number of clients, and everything is based on availability. So the assumption we're going to have that investor assignment to advisor is quasi-random, conditional on the factors driving onboarding. And I'm going to show you some evidence that that is actually the case. So here I'm having the same characteristics I showed you before on the summary statistics for those individuals that are assigned to high retention and those are assigned to low retention advisors. And then I have the difference and the t-stats, right? So if I look, for example, at the wealth, you have that the ones that are assigned to high retention, I have $950,000 in assets under management. The other ones had 993, and the difference is 47,000, which is not statistically significant. If I have like the percentage of mutual funds is 66% and 67%, and the difference is not significant, and so on and so forth. So what it's telling you is, in terms of the wealth and the characteristics of the portfolio that individuals have, whether they're assigned to a high retention advisor or low retention advisor, they're very similar. There are some differences, however. For example, in terms of age, you tend to have that low retention advisors are assigned slightly older individuals. I mean, economically, I don't find this particularly relevant, but it's something that could be a potential concern. Okay. Now, the second thing I want to show you is that I need to convince you is that high and low retention advisors are assigned customers at the same rate, right? So it's not the case that if I have a star advisor, I give him like 1 million clients, and instead if I have a crappy advisor, I give him 2. They need to have that individuals are given allocated clients at the same rate. And so this on the left-hand side, what I'm showing you is I'm taking all my advisors and I'm grouping them in terms of how busy they are every given period. And then this is the net clients added every month, which is basically how many clients they're assigned and minus the clients they lose every month. And so you see is that what happens is that if you start off, you're not given many clients at the beginning, simply because you're still starting out and they want you to kind of become more and more proficient. Over time, you start onboarding more and more clients. And then if you are at capacity, you see that net number of clients that you add is effectively 0, right? So this is kind of, once you are at capacity, they're only going to assign new clients to you just to replace the one you lose. And if I work with the clients that are added every month and I look at high retention, low retention advisor, you can see for the most part, they're identical. There is one difference here. For the lowest group, you tend to have that at the lowest group, so those people that start up, you have that the high retention advisors are allocated slightly higher number of customers every period. Okay, so this we're going to actually have to be careful about this in the implementation, because this can kind of break down our identification strategy. Now, in terms of the empirical estimates, let me skip this. There we have. Oh yeah, we don't have too much time. Let me show you the results. The first thing we do is we're going to compute advisor retention using this leave one out estimator. I'm going to split them into 2 groups, those that have retention below median and those that have retention above median. And then I'm going to do standard Kaplan-Meier survivor estimates, right? I'm going to see how many people that are assigned to the high retention advisors and low retention advisors stay within robo-advice at every point in time. And this is what you find. The red ones here are the people that are assigned to low retention advisors, and then high retention advisors are in blue. So after 3 years, you have that 85% of the individuals that are assigned to low retention advisors quit, and you have the corresponding number for low investors, for those individuals that are assigned to high retention advisors, is 90%. Now, if I exclude those 10% of advisors with few clients, the one where the kind of the quasi-random allocation was breaking down, I get exactly the same numbers. If I do a Cox proportional hazard model, I find that type 1 human advisors, which is basically the high retention advisors, reduces hazard by as much as 25%. Now, the second thing I want to show you is what happens across different market conditions. Now, I'm going to run panel regression where I have a dummy for whether an individual quits on a given month. And then I'm going to have a dummy for whether the market return the previous month was negative, so it was a kind of a bad market. I'm going to have a dummy for whether you were assigned to a good or a bad financial advisor, a high retention or low retention financial advisor, as well as the interaction between the two. Okay, so the first set of estimates I want to show you is just, I'm going to use this crisp return, which is just the value-weighted return on the stock markets across all the stocks. What you'll see is that on every given month, there is that 0.3% of clients quit. In bad market, there is a bump of approximately 13 basis points. You have that unconditionally type 1 advisor reduce attrition by as much as 8 basis points. And finally, you have that the interaction is statistically significant, which basically tells you that good financial advisors are particularly good at reducing attrition in periods of bad market. Now, if I do it with the crisp return, I do investor return, I use the volatility of the market, I use the volatility of the investor portfolio, I get always the same answer. And now let me show you kind of how this plot would look like. If I work with this blue are the high retention advisor and the red are the low retention advisor, and this is what happens in good market conditions, and this would happen in poor market conditions. What you'll see is that good advisors are going to keep, basically they have the same attrition in good and bad market conditions. You instead have that bad advisors, I mean, they have a higher average attrition compared to good advisor, but you have that the big bump happens in bad market conditions. And now we can take these estimates and map them back to the model and see where is or what is the source of algorithmic aversion. Now, if you remember, we were splitting kind of the attrition into baseline quit rate and I had the sensitivity. I can use the parameters that I just estimated and show you that high type advisors reduce baseline quit rate by 23%. This is just by using the kind of unconditional quit rate and the dummy for a high type advisor. I can also see what is the sensitivity to the market conditions on the basis of the advisor. You have that in one case, there is the interaction is such that the sensitivity to the market conditions is very low. So effectively, high type advisor reduce the sensitivity to market condition by as much as 90%. And then finally, one thing that we can do is that we can take investors that have been robo-advised for very little time and those that have been advised for a very long time. And one thing that will happen is like, if I run exactly the same estimates and I work with those that have short tenure and those that have long tenure, one thing that you'll notice that the bad market conditions is significant for the short tenure advisor, but for the short tenure clients, but not for the long tenure clients. What does this mean? Is that over time, individuals learn how the robo-advisor works and they're not phased by period of market downturns. And for those long-term investors, one thing that we can do is that we actually have that the baseline quit rates, we know that was kind of the sum of two components, the baseline, this utility from interacting with the algorithm and the expected quality of the algorithm. But once you have that individuals have been in the service for a long time, you can imagine that by then they understand how the kind of the algorithm works and what is the quality of it. And so we can attribute the kind of differential quit rate between those that are assigned to high retention and low retention advisors purely to the fixed cost or the disutility of interacting with the robo-advisor, which effectively kind of reduces the quit rate by as much as 21%. Okay? Now, so this is all I wanted to cover. So like in sum, we have a model of algorithmic aversion where you have two components. The investor learns about how the algorithm operates, and you have this ongoing disutility or distrust of the algorithm. We map this model to the real world using data from a hybrid robo-advisors where we have quasi-random assignment or advisors to clients to advisors. And finally, we find that algorithmic aversion is reduced a lot by human advisors. You have that high-type advisors can retain more clients in turbulent times, and experienced clients react less to the performance and to market downturns. And you have that between disutility and instead preferences or like expectations, you have that disutility channels are more important compared to the expectation about the quality of the robo-advisor. Well, thank you so much for your attention. It's been a pleasure to be here, and thank you.
Thank you so much.
If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take for as much time as you want.
At least one,
Oh,
and then
yeah,
there is a
yeah.
Should I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just wondering about the interpretation of the continuation value in your model, because for me, it would also be a feature of robo-advice that it's kind of easily accessible. So can they not opt back in?
Yeah. So that's a fantastic comment. So there is two things. So we bake in the model that you cannot re-enter. One thing that is important though is that if you think about the structure of the model is such that you update your preference, you update your belief regarding the quality of robo-advisor only when you're robo-advised. So even if I did not have that continuation value, once I'm out, I don't learn anything in. So in principle, I actually would not even have that rejoining in unless you allow the investor to learn about the quality of robo-advisor when they're not signed up, right? So if you can observe something, but I think you're getting right at the end. So, whenever you have this kind of structural models, you have that you need to focus on some things and you take some shortcuts. Like, for example, I don't like about the fact that in this model, we have that people are born robo-advised, right? So why not modeling also the onboarding decisions? But the problem is that once you start matching these to the data, it's going to become too messy. But your point is super well taken, yeah. Go ahead.
Another question is, in your model, if I got it right, everybody is equally good at assessing the quality of the advice they get, because that's also quite a strong assumption, I think.
Absolutely. So in our case, we don't we have that the belief parameter when you sign up are affected by the advisor you're assigned to, but we don't have the feature of heterogeneity in the ability of the individuals to understand. And I think that your point is super well taken. So one thing that we want to do is two things. First of all, right now you have that individuals are Bayesian in a way of how they learn. So they kind of treat good performance and bad performance in the same way, but it's kind of very unrealistic because in many cases, when you have good performance, people don't update anything or they re-update it in the poor. And then we don't condition on clients' characteristics, but that's something that we should do. I mean, we don't condition on client characteristics mainly because the source of identification when it comes to the data, it's the random assignment of the advisor, right? For us, we don't focus on heterogeneity, but I completely agree with you. In principle, what you can do is kind of condition on the sophistication of the individual and then do that. Absolutely. That's a very good point. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for the wonderful comments, and I'm looking forward to kind of discuss more during the break.
Thank you so much.